Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our last lesson in Topic 4. Can you believe it? Today we are learning about problem solving and reasoning in Topic 4, Lesson 9. Our learning intention for today is I can use reasoning to write and solve number stories. Our Solve and Share begins on page 193 in our Envisions Volume 1 workbook. Our Solve and Share tells us to write a number story for 14 minus 8. Then write an equation to match your story. So be thinking about, what do these numbers stand for? So the numbers 14 and 8. Think about what number is the part and what number is the whole. We also see that it has a subtraction symbol in it. So be thinking about, what does this mean? Are we going to be adding or taking away something? Think of the words that we can use in this problem to help show what our equation is asking for. So we need to write a number story for 14 minus 8. So let's start by saying, which number is the whole? Which number is the whole? 14 or 8? Well, we know when we are subtracting, our whole goes at the beginning, so we are taking away from 14. And our part that we know is 8. 8. So they want us to write a problem that could help us show 14 minus 8. So let's start and pick a topic we can talk about. Well, this week we are talking a lot about animals. So how about we talk about animals for our Solve and Share? Now, since we're having to write a story problem, and I know that the story tool takes Mrs. Collier a while, so I'm just going to type mine to save us some time on this video. But I want you writing at home, so we'll talk about animals. So 14 is our whole. Let's talk about dogs. Let's say dogs. So in writing a story problem, you have to have 3 components. That means 3 things that make up this story. We have to have a sentence that represents our whole, a sentence that represents our symbol, so are we adding or subtracting? Something that represents our part, and also what we are trying to find out in this story problem. So let's start with, there are 14 dogs. So this is our first sentence we'll say in our story problem. So it tells us our whole and what we are talking about. So there are 14 dogs. We could say 8 dogs run away. So we have a first sentence that tells us how many dogs there are. Now we have our second sentence that tells us our part in the story. And it also says that 6 dogs run away. So that means they are leaving from our total, which also helps us show that we are subtracting. So what do we want to find out? We could say, how many dogs are left? And that is a question, so we're going to put a question mark at the end. So let me move this down here. So the story problem that we could write for this is, there are 14 dogs. So that tells us, again, our whole and what we are talking about. Next we could say 8 dogs run away. because we know we have a part of 8 and that we are subtracting. And last, we could say, how many dogs are left? So this story problem is helping us solve the equation 14 minus 8 equals blank. Blank. So now that we have part of our equation and also our number story, we need to solve. So for this, I am going to use the strategy of the part, whole chart. And if you would like to use a different strategy to solve, like a tens frame or a number line or even drawing pictures, that is perfectly fine. But I'm going to use a part, whole chart. So I know my part of 8, so I'm going to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now I'm going to count on from 8 to get to 14. So I'm going to count on this side and say 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So to get from 8 to 14, I had to add 6 more. So that means that 8 plus 6 is equal to 14. So 14 minus 8 is equal to 6. So we were able to write a number story for our equation, show it in our equation, and also use a strategy to solve. So now let's watch our animated video to help us go along with our worksheet on page 194.
Write a number story for 5 plus 7. Then write an equation to match your story.
A number story tells how the equation works.
Look at the problem. What kind of story will you write? An addition story or a subtraction story? Select your answer.
So our equation says 5 plus 7. So are we going to be writing a subtraction story or an addition story? What symbol do we see in our problem? We see a plus sign, so that means we are writing an addition story.
You will write an addition story. How can you show what the numbers and symbols mean? Think about what 5, 7, and the symbol mean in the problem. You can use that to write a story. What does the symbol mean? It is the plus sign, and it means that you are going to add. What numbers will you add in this problem? You will add 5 and 7. What kind of number story can you write? You can write a problem about joining or a problem about two parts of a whole. Lee sees 5 bugs in her garden. Then 7 more bugs fly in. How many bugs does Lee see in all? Lee sees 12 bugs in all. There were 5 bugs and 7 more bugs came. So you add. Is this the only story problem for 5 plus 7 equals 12? Select your answer.
So is this story about Lee and the bugs in her garden the only story problem that somebody could write for 5 plus 7 equals 12? No, so many of us could write different stories. No, so many of us could write different stories using these numbers. So there are definitely other stories we could write.
No, there are other stories you could tell for this equation. How did you check the story?
Let's think. How could we check and make sure that our story matches our equation.
You can see if the number story matches the equation 5 plus 7 equals 12. Now you know how to write a number story and write an equation that matches your story.
So now let's look at our guided practice on page 194. Our guided practice says complete the number story. Then complete the equation to match the story. Draw a picture to help. Number 1 says 17 minus 9 equals blank. It has already filled in part of our guided practice for us, so let's look over it together. It says Carlos has 17, so we'll trace over 17 dog treats. Tom has 9, so we'll trace over 9 dog treats. How many more treats does Carlos have? And it wants us to write our answer in the blank. So Carlos has 17. Tom has 9. We want to find out how many more treats does Carlos have. So in our equation, we took the whole of 17 and wrote it into our story. We took the part of 9, also wrote it into our story. And then we were subtracting. We are subtracting in this problem because we are wanting to find out how many more treats does Carlos have, but that means that Tom has less than Carlos. So Tom only has 9 treats and Carlos has 17. So now we are wanting to solve 17 minus 9. So again, you can use whichever strategy you would like to use. I think for this one though, I'm going to use a quick tens frame. So if you want to use a tens frame with me, you can, or if you would like to use a part whole, a drawing, whatever you would like to use, you can also do that. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so I know this is 10. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in my tens frame because I know I have a whole of 17. So that it's definitely going to be 10 at least. So here is 10. Now I need to count to 17. So I'm going to say 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Awesome. And I know that I am subtracting 9. So I'm going to make 10 by taking away these down here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now I have 10, but I needed to subtract 9, and I've only subtracted 7, so I have to count on. So I have 7, 8, 9 that I eliminated. Well, after I do that, how many am I left with in my tens frame that are not crossed out? We're left with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So Carlos has 8 more treats than Tom. So we were able to complete the number story, solve for our equation, and write in our blanks. So in our guided practice, our number story was already created for us. So in your independent practice, you are going to have to create your own story problems. So let's take a look and see. On your independent practice on page 195, it says, write a number story to show the problem. Then complete the equation to match your story. So on your independent practice, you are having to solve 3 problems, And our friend down here says you can use pictures, numbers, or words to help you. So let's look at number 2 together. So on number 2, we have 9 plus 4 equals blank. So let's look at these numbers and see, do we know parts or do we know a whole? We know 9 and 4, but we do not know our whole. So we only know our parts, and are we adding or subtracting? We have a plus sign, so we are going to be adding to find our whole. So in our story problem, we would have to show the numbers 4 and 9 and how to add them together. So let's do number 2 together. Now you can use what I am going to say, or if you feel like you are ready to write your own story problem, you can also do that. So on number 2, let's think. Now again, I'm going to use my typing tool because my writing tool takes me a very long time to write with my mouse on the screen. So let's see, we have the numbers 9 and 4, and we have to write a problem where we can add them together. So first I like to think of what is my story problem going to be about. In our solve and share, we had animals. How about we do, food. Let's do food. How about we do cookies? Cookies. So I could say has 9 sugar cookies. Then we could say Jim has 4. I like chocolate. How about we do chocolate cookies? So we're adding them together. So what would we want to know? So if Molly has 9 sugar cookies and Jim has 4 chocolate cookies, and we want to add these cookies together, so we would want to know how many cookies are there in all. We're going to put a question mark because we're asking how many cookies are there in all. So let's see. Does our story problem have our part of 9? Yes, it does. It says 9 sugar cookies. Do we have a part of 4? Yep, we have 4 chocolate cookies. And then when we say how many are in all, that lets us add those numbers together. So then 9 plus 4 is equal to what? 9 plus 4. Well, let's think. If we have 9, that's just 1 away from 10. So I could take a 1 from 4 and make 10. Then I would have 3 left. So 10 plus 3 gives me 13. So that means 9 plus 4 would also give me 13. So this is an example of how we wrote our story problem. Now I know some of us might need some help spelling some of these problems, and that is okay. I'm not looking for how well you spelled your problems. Yes, it's important, but our skill that we are wanting to focus on is that you are able to use the equation correctly and write it in a problem. So our example here of Molly has 9 sugar cookies, Jim has 4 sugar cookies. You can write about any sentence that you want. If you want to write about bugs or monster trucks or art supplies and say paintbrushes, you can do that. These are your story problems that you get to write. Just make sure that you include your numbers. And if you are adding, you write somewhere that you are asking for how many there are in all or how many are there total. And if you are subtracting, you need to make sure you say either you take away, or then you need to write somewhere in your story problem that something was taken away or subtracted. So now try and write a story problem for number 3 and number 4. So pay attention to the numbers. Think of what is your whole, what is your part, and see if you are subtracting or adding in these problems. After you have completed writing your story problems, we have one more activity to do on our problem-solving page on page 196. Now on this page, we have 3 problems, 5, 6, and 7. Well, all of these problems are going to be talking about the same thing. So let's read this at the top. I'm going to put a star next to it because it's very important, this information. So it says school books. John takes 2 books home. He leaves 4 books at school. How can John write an addition story about his school books? So if John takes 2 books home and he leaves 4 books at school, if they are wanting John to write an addition story about his school books, what could he do with these 2 numbers? When you are adding, what are you doing with these 2 parts? When you add 2 numbers together, you are joining 2 numbers. You are joining 2 numbers together when you add. So, how can John write an addition story about his school books? I'll use my writing tool for this one. We could say that John could join them together. Oh, this writing tool is hard, but I like to try and use it sometimes. So how could John write an addition story about his school books? He could join them together. So then it says, write an addition question about John's books. So this question that we would ask, think about our problems that we have wrote so far. For example, in our solve and share, the question that we asked were how many dogs were left. In our guided practice, we asked how many more treats does Carlos have? And in our cookie question, we asked how many cookies do we have in all? So those are examples of an addition question. So that is an example of a question we could ask in our story problem. So it asks us to write an addition question about John's books. So we know that we are adding the 2 books he takes home and the 4 books he has at school. So if we know we are adding, what is a question that we could ask John about his books? We know our part of 4 and our part of 2. So if we know our part and our part, what information do we not know? We do not know our whole. So something that we can ask John is, how many books did John have in all? So that is an addition question that we could ask John about his books. So if we know he has 2 books at home and 4 books at school, we can ask him, well, how many books do you have in all? In all. So we did that problem together because writing story problems is a new skill for us, and I know we are still working on it. So let's look at number 6. Now it says draw a picture and write an addition equation to solve your addition question. So our addition question is, how many books did John have in all? So it tells us if he has 2 books at home and 4 books together, write what our addition equation would look like in the blank. So we know we are adding, so you need to write your symbols in the circles. So if we are adding, and we know our equal sign will go at the end, so we're going to write equal. So write our addition equation for this story problem in the blank. If John has 2 books at home and 4 books at school, we want to know how many books does he have total. And you can show your work in the box over here. And after you write that equation, it says on number 7 is 6 minus 4 equals 2. In the same fact family, so remember our fact families, as your addition equation, circle yes or no. Now remember, in a fact family, both equations will have the same 3 numbers, so they will have the same parts and the same whole. So look at your equation that you wrote on number 6 and say if it is in a fact family with 6 minus 4 equals 2. You'll circle yes or no, and if you need to show your work, you will write it in the box here. Once you have completed answering those questions and you have your story problems shown, then you are all done for your math today. And if you need any extra help with this assignment, please just let me know and I will come to help you.